pretend we're at a dinner party. We've introduced ourselves, small talked for a little while, and then inevitably the topic of work comes up. My job? Well, here it comes. I'm a sexual anthropologist. Now imagine the look. Imagine the other moms at the fundraising dinner, or my husband's colleagues at the Christmas barbecue or get-together. I have to explain what it is I do quickly before people get the wrong idea. So, I study the ways that sex and sexuality are shaped by culture, because humans have this knack of thinking that the norms of our own society are absolute. But they're not. They change. And that's why I'm here today, to tell you, as a sexual anthropologist, that sex doesn't matter. Let me explain. The more we question our assumptions and look at sexuality across cultures and across time periods, what we see is that the range is truly astonishing. For instance, take the Zananese. They live off the east coast of Africa, and I find their culture very fascinating. In Zana, the sensuality of women is celebrated in seasonal festivities. Women wear small clay amulet necklaces of the only body part designed purely for pleasure, the clitoris. It's a lovely design. And hamama nami is a common greeting which translates roughly to, I celebrate your beauty. For in Zana, women old and young alike feel beautiful. As for virginity, it's not lost, but consecrated when a young Zanan woman it just feels right to her. Her mother throws her a party, her friends come over, a grandmother maybe will come, or great aunts. And then they drink a little alcohol, look at a little bit of erotica, and make their way down to the men's hut, where men's services are for sale. Once there, they choose a man to pleasure the young woman, and afterwards, that's that. She goes on to have as many lovers as she pleases, and it's looked upon as an omen of great prosperity. Wait a minute, the woman at the dinner party says to me. Is that true? Of course it isn't. But don't you think it's kind of a cool example of how gender and culture shape our sexual practices? So my mythological Zana is actually the absolute reverse of my PhD research. It all started with my friend Erica. She was my best friend in high school, and she came from Chile. She told me in her home culture, it was common for men to have their first sexual experience at a brothel. And I found that really earth-shattering. How would that affect their future and how they felt about women and their sexuality? I later learned it's common in many Latino cultures and is considered normal. So herein lies a truth about human sexuality. We are sexually ethnocentric, meaning the sexual norms of our own society are often considered standard or the ideal without critical reflection. What this can cause is unrealistic expectations and sexual angst that need not exist. So my friend's casual comment went on to have quite a big impact on me. I studied anthropology and read about the sexuality of women in the Middle East, the Polynesian Islands, and in my native Canada. And it appeared that everything from puberty rights, dating, homosexuality, polygamy, divorce, is all enacted differently, depending on where you grow up. Sociologists William Simon and John Gagnon have a name for these lessons or sexual lessons we have in our culture. And they're called sexual scripts. I'll ask you to remember that. And it's true that much of our behavior is guided by scripts, whether we know it or not. If you take the classic first date, I don't suspect you arrange your meeting on Tinder, show up at the cafe, sit down, order lattes, and then start fondling each other's genitals under the table. Might that come at the end of a date or the end of a succession of dates? We are guided by these things, whether we know it or not. I think I might move on from that image. I did my PhD research in the Philippines, and one of the things I looked at was virginity. And I found a giant double standard, such as in the West. Here's another sexual truth about human culture. It seems throughout much of history, what men can do, women usually cannot, without a lot of stigma. And this script we're having a hell of a hard time getting rid of. Despite Filipinas' modernity, urbanization, and high levels of technology, premarital sex is still considered a giant no-no. You are a disgrada, a disgrace. It's the best gift you can give your husband. Now, although many men in the Philippines have their first sexual experience with a girlfriend or wife, many too have it with a commercial sex worker. It's perceived as a rite of passage from adolescence to manhood, and the woman's body is given as a gift. So do you see this sort of theme we are talking about here? A woman's virgin body is given as a gift to her new husband. A woman's contaminated body is given as a gift to the sexual novice. So what? For men, it's like Christmas every day. Ironically, from my research, I found that if young Filipinas save their virginity for their husband, it's often quite likely he'll be unfaithful. Unlikely she'll bring it up and have discussions about it, and unlikely they'll discuss safe sex. This leaves wives at risk of transmitted sexual infections and, of course, heartache. It also reminds me of that Japanese practice when women are packing their husband's suitcases prior to going away on a business trip. Do you know what they often throw in there? An extra pack of condoms. Pretty considerate, eh? Have fun while you're away, love. My point is, far from being natural, our ideas about sex and sexuality shift across cultures and time periods. And therefore, they don't need to be taken so seriously. And we don't need to feel bad if our sexuality doesn't match the current culture's ideals. To me, I find this quite liberating. As a sexual practitioner, helping people with their sexuality, and as a member of society myself who's not immune to such messages. If these are scripts, can't we, to some extent, rewrite them? The scripts I would like to debunk have to do with female sexual dysfunction and female sexual desire. Uwe Hartman notes in a paper that the sexual behavior that we engage in is judged against the specific culture we are in. Whereas, 100 years ago, a sensuous and sexually interested woman was regarded as mentally disturbed. Nowadays, a lack of sexual interest is judged as requiring treatment. It's a clinical symptom. Oh, the pendulum swings. And we have seen culture and religion shifting as defining focuses on human sexuality to other major players taking over their job, the media, medical and scientific world, and of course, pharmaceutical companies. But we'll get to that. So let's move on and talk a little bit about our sex drive. By this I mean our desire for sexual union and pleasure, fantasies, seeking sexual activity, things like that. Do you know what women's number one sexual concern is? Lack of sexual interest. And many top researchers have shown that once women are in an established relationship, they no longer feel spontaneous desire and initiate sex. So what's the reason for this? Well, for both men and women, desire dissipates during the duration of a relationship, during the duration of a life, and in the crossover of becoming parents. Just another way children cramp our style. Anthropologist Helen Fisher has looked at limerence when we're first in love, and our sex drives are typically higher, and serotonin and dopamine are zipping about. Unfortunately, over time, we develop a chemical tolerance to the person that we're in a relationship with, meaning they just don't ignite that same chemical reaction. It's kind of sad that passion and familiarity don't mix. But imagine our productivity otherwise, if everybody was in love constantly. Poetry rather than foreign policies, quickies in the back seat rather than carpooling. Now, women specifically often don't feel like sex because they don't feel sexy. Another topic for another day. But what they do feel alongside is guilt, that they should be desiring more. There's this pervasive message that to be in a healthy relationship, you should be having lots of sex. Trading on our hyper-sexed public space with films and the media and popular culture, and in many cases our quite muted private sexual life, the societal message is strong. It says, not only should women look desirable and actively desire, while steering a career and raising glossy, articulate children in our eco-homes at our organic dinner tables. And for those who fall short, they're deemed not just inferior, but dysfunctional. Do you know what the commonly cited definition of a sexless marriage is? One in which a couple has sex 10 times a year or less. Now, I can understand a teenage boy coming up with this definition, really. But world-weary adults who've been around the romantic block? Come on. If a long-term couple are having sex about once a month, I think they're doing wonderfully. We should congratulate them for keeping their sexual spark alive. And by the way, who has the right to deem how often we should be having sex? It's up to us. It's up to us individually and up to us between ourselves and our partner. Now I'm going to talk about female sexual dysfunction. We're basing our knowledge of female sexual dysfunction from the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And in it, there's a dysfunction that greatly concerns me. This is the female sexual interest and arousal disorder. Now, as you can see from this, using it as a template, if a couple came into my practice and they'd been, together for 8 years and had 2 children, and over the last 6 months, she'd been feeling distressed because she wasn't that interested in sex, wasn't having too many fantasies, and was knocking her partner back all the time. Well, according to the DSM-5, she has a sexual dysfunction. According to me, she's perfectly normal. So how could something so commonplace be pathologized into a disease? Some say it's the result of high-profile sex researchers being in bed with pharmaceutical companies. And it is certainly true that many of the papers and the projects about sexuality are being funded by pharmaceutical companies. Inflated rates of female dysfunction create the need for treatment. Enter Big Pharma. So, drug companies are in a race trying to create a pink Viagra, a global sex drug for women. These drugs come in different forms: patches, pills, sprays, and creams. They work by targeting different parts of our body, our blood flow, our hormones, or our brain chemistry. And though they're not quite yet on sale at a pharmacy near you, they're not far off. The reason they're not quite on sale is because the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, haven't considered them quite effective enough or quite safe enough. I'm worried about a drug like this being roped into a discussion about female sexual inadequacy or dysfunction, because I've seen each time a potential new blockbuster drug goes to the FDA, that the pharmaceutical parent of that drug unleashing a global campaign to market the so-called disease. And what do women themselves say when asked what's causing their sexual problems? Do they think it's a complex medical condition? No. Usually they boil it down to relationship problems or the natural declining of libido in most relationships. I'll finish off here by saying that women's sexuality is still mysterious. We don't know what constitutes female sexual dysfunction. We don't know what female sexual response looks like. And we can't agree if women have a definitive sexual peak. Therefore, it is unrealistic to expect us to have a similar sex drive. It's crucial for us to question the scripts that we are given and to question who defines normal and abnormal, sexy or sexless. And since sex as we know it doesn't matter, there's nothing to prevent us from writing our own scripts. Since there's never been a society where all women from different socioeconomic groups have been encouraged to explore their sensuality without censure, we do not know what female sexuality truly is: free range. Who knows? Given time to experiment, maybe one day Xana will exist. And in Xana, it will not matter how much sex a woman has. She could have as much as she likes or as little as she likes. The new script should be that it's up to us to decide. And that really does matter. Thank you.